Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto got married with Temari during the wave mission? If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Chapter 1, Failed Mission and Departure. The retrieval mission was an utter disaster. That was all Nara Shikamaru could think as he sat outside Choji's operating room waiting to hear news of his friend's survival. He wore a mesh net shirt with a short-sleeved gray jacket with brown pants. Over top of the jacket he wore a tan-green vest indicating he was a chunin in Konohagakure's forces and his Hitai 8 tied to his left bicep. His hair was pulled into a short top-knot ponytail and his narrow brown eyes, usually bored or irritated, were downcast in sadness. I told you already, it's useless to just sit around moping about what went wrong, act like a chunin sheesh. Came from a female voice belonging to Sabaku no Temari. She was a genin of Sunagaku and wore a long-sleeved purple blouse with a gray top over it. She also wore a blue skirt with a long red sash tied into a bow around her waist. Around her neck proudly sat the Hitai 8 of her village. That's just it, my teammates were counting on me to lead them. Hell, even Naruto stepped aside to let me lead because he knew that I could plan out the mission best, but in the end I failed them. Maybe I should just give up being a shinobi. Shikamaru sighed as he got up and began to walk away. Now that's the attitude of a coward and certainly not of a shinobi. Came a voice from around the corner. It was Shikamaru's father and leader of their clan, Nara Shikaku. He looked like a carbon copy of Shikamaru with the exception of two prominent scars on the right side of his face and his goatee. He wore a meshed shirt underneath his flak jacket, a deerskin coat over that and hand guards. "To-san, what do you mean?" Shikamaru asked as he turned to look at his father, who had a scowl on his face. "Quitting just because your first mission as a chunin wasn't a success is just pathetic, both to your village and your squad mates who risked their lives for the sake of the mission. If you were to quit, time would move forward and they could get a squad leader that couldn't properly lead them through their mission and they would end up dead, and all it would do is make you feel even worse about having deserting them." Shikaku pointed out as he walked over and placed a comforting hand on Shikamaru's shoulder. "Quit being a coward and focusing on the negatives. Use this failure as a learning experience to grow into the shinobi and leader your friends hope you to be." Shikaku encouraged as he gave his son a brief smile, while Temari looked on from her seat. The overhead light indicating surgery was going on, then went off signaling that the procedure had been completed. One of the double doors opened and a figure walked out into the hall. "It took some doing, but we managed to pull Akamichi Choji out of the red zone," Senju Tsunade said as she emerged from the OR. She was a woman who looked to be in her 20s with long blonde hair pulled back into two ponytails tied with purple hairbands that fell to the small of her back. Tsune's outfit consisted of a gray, kimono-style blouse with no sleeves, held closed by a broad, dark bluish-gray obi that matches her pants. Her blouse was closed quite low, revealing her sizable cleavage. She wore open-toed sandals with high heels. A prominent feature other than her generous bust that could give Sakari a run for her money was a violet rhombus on her forehead. "It's due in large part to your clan's medical manual that we were able to counter the effects of the Sanshoku no Ginyaku, 3-colored pills. Thank you for that, Shikaku," Tsunade said as she took the bench opposite of Temari. "Of course, Hokage-sama," Shikaku said as he sent a small smile in receiving her praise. "Tsunade-sama, I have news," came a voice rushing up the hall. Kato Shizune was a woman in her 20s with shoulder-length black hair with bangs and dark eyes. She wore a long bluish-black kimono with white trimmings, held closed by a white obi, and open-toed sandals with low heels. It gave her an simple but beautiful look. She stopped in front of Shikamaru to catch her breath for a moment. Hyuga Neji's operation was a success, and Inuzuka Kiba has a serious injury, but it's not life-threatening. Also, Hitaki Kakashi and Uzumaki Naruto have just returned to the village. Uzumaki-san has a critical injury that needs to be addressed right away," Shizune said, which prompted her mentor to her feet as Tsunade rushed over. "What's his current condition?" Suon demanded as they began rushing up the hallway with Shikamaru, Temari and Shikaku on their heels. "The two Iryo medical ninja units you sent out performed an emergency on-site procedure to stabilize him for transport. He has 2 large holes in his torso, one in the right shoulder and—" Shizune started as she led the group up 2 flights of stairs. "What is it, Shizune?" Tsunade asked while getting the impression that she wouldn't like the answer. The second hole is on the left side and managed to miss his heart by a few centimeters, any more and we could have lost him. Shizune replied as she watched her mentor freeze up mid-stride before picking up the pace double time. I want you to send for Jiraiya, tell him that if he isn't here in the next 10 minutes I will be most displeased with him. Tsunade said as she snapped her amber orbs to her apprentice. Hi, Tsunade-sama. By the way, Naruto is in OR 3. I'll be along as soon as I can. Shizune said before she broke off to contact the Gamma Sennin. Damn, Uchiha Sasuke better hope that the Kyuubi's seal holds, and Naruto-kun can pull through. Otherwise I will hunt him down myself before leaving Uchiha Itachi the only living Uchiha left on the face of the planet. Tsunade thought as she rounded the corner to OR3 only to see a shocking sight. Sabaku no Gaara stood in front of the doors leading to the surgery taking place with a scowl on his face as his sand slithered ominously within the large gourd on his back as he kept the other medics at bay. Gaara wore a beige-colored pair of overalls with a large strap and sash worn across his body with his Hittite 8 sewn across the strap as well. He had short brick red hair that hung in a mop fashion over top of a tattoo on the left side of his forehead that read, I, or love in kanji. His seafoam green eyes were narrowed in focus as he watched the Godimes approach. What is going on here? We have a critical patient in need of surgery. Tsunade ordered as she approached the door. Thanked Kami Hokage-sama, this Suna nin is preventing us from entering the surgery room. One of the Iryo nin declared as he pointed a finger at Gaara who stood in defense of his fellow Jinchuriki. Gaara-san, please step aside so I can help Naruto. Tsunade said with a firm demand as she stared Gaara in the eyes firmly. After a few seconds of deeming Tsunade trustworthy enough to help his kin, Gaara stepped aside and allowed the Namakuji Hime to pass but not before leaving her with some parting words. Tsunade-sama, do all that you can for him. Gaara said as he hesitated in an effort to form the right words. Of course. Tsunade replied as she spun around to watch Gaara walk off with a smile before setting her face into a serious expression and stepped through the doors. Once she got inside with the rest of her staff, Tsunade could see just how severe Naruto's condition was. He had a large fist-sized hole in his chest and it looked very ragged. To top it all off, she could see the wisps of red chakra every now and again as they licked his body in an effort to keep Naruto alive. So the Kyuubi isn't ready to die just yet. Good, it can give us that extra chance to save him. Tsunade thought as she then began instructing the surgery as she stood over Naruto's body and began to work. XXXXXXXX. Naruto's minscape. The Kyuubi no Kitsune looked down from behind its prison at its jailer. It couldn't hold in the grimace of disgust that graced its large maw as it revealed its teeth, which were as large as an adult male's leg. You nearly cost us both our lives this day, Ninjin. Were it not for me you would be dead and I would be within that blasted Shinigami's grasp. Kyuubi mused as he looked down at the unconscious form of Naruto as he floated in the water that had risen to waist level since the mission drew to a close. As I said before and shall say again, you should be grateful to both I and that damnatable Yondaime Hokage who sealed me into you. Kyuubi continued with a small smile, even thought Naruto couldn't hear him, before he lapsed into silence. The sounds of watery footsteps had the Kyuubi snapping its head up to the direction of the sound. Whatever was moving closer wasn't appreciated by the chakra mass of malice. It didn't like things coming into its domain within its jailer's mindscape uninvited. Soon a figure could be made out somewhat in the dim crimson lighting. Tell me something, Kyuubi, why should I be grateful to the being that's made my personal life a living hell from behind a sutra paper and fuinjutsu kanji? A voice similar to the Gaki's asked as the figure stepped into the light fully. Gaki, how is this possible? Kyuubi said in a moment of shock as it was looking down at another copy of Uzumaki Naruto. The one striding forward with even steps was dressed just as the annoyingly cheerful version would be, except with different colors. He was wearing a black tracksuit with purple on the upper shoulders area as well as around the waist, a gray swirl with a tassel on the left side, a red swirl on the back, a large white collar, black pants, blue sandals. He even wore the iconic Hittite 8 of Konohagakure atop his forehead, although in black. It's very much possible, Kyuubi, considering the Naruto floating before you is just a persona created by my mind. Unfortunately it grew to believe it was really me up until this retrieval mission. Shin Naruto, replied, gesturing to the fake Naruto. Kyuubi looked down only to blink in surprise at finding Shin Naruto kneeling over the fake. the kitsune did a double take to the entrance of the room and back to the two Narutos 3 different times before shrugging and lashing out with its enormous paw in an effort to kill his jailer and escape his prison. The act kicked up a good amount of water before Kyuubi lifted his paw to watch the blood stain the water underneath. Sadly, there was no blood, there wasn't even a broken body to speak of. Glancing around again, Kyuubi spotted by Naruto's by the entrance to the cage room. "Damned brat, get back here so I can kill you and escape," Kyuubi demanded with a growl as his crimson orbs tried killing both Narutos on the spot with a smoldering glare. "I'll return once you've grown civil enough to actually have a conversation with, until then you can just enjoy your own company for a while. Goodbye Kyuubi." Shishin Naruto said. He hoisted his created self onto his shoulders and walked out of the cage room with Kyuubi's bellows of revenge and subjugation beating at his back. Shin Naruto didn't even spare the kitsune an over-the-shoulder glance as he headed for the exit. To his mind, as they walked along, the fake Naruto began to regress in age until there was a young 5-year-old on Shin's back. "You did such a good job of seeing us through all these years, even if it almost cost us our life and career numerous times. Sadly, it's time I return to the land of the living, but that doesn't mean that a portion of you won't be coming with me. I'm sure I can use your sense of humor and morality to help see me through this," Shin thought as he glanced at the younger Naruto on his back, who was fading away with each step taken. As Shin's footsteps grew closer to the exit, younger Naruto seemed to fade a bit more each time. Just before Shin passed through the door of light, younger Naruto mumbled something that would stay for the rest of Shin's days. "Thank you for the chance at living," the childlike voice said sleepily as he was absorbed into Shin, who walked through the door and woke up. Real world. Sometime later, Konoha Hospital. Naruto awoke slowly to his body feeling like lead wrapped in pain with a dose of fog for good measure. That was to be expected, seeing as he did come a battle that nearly cost him his life. Gingerly pulling himself into a sitting position, Naruto found himself surrounded by the white walls of the Konoha Hospital. If it was one place Naruto hated to find himself, it was the hospital, but right now he could care less as he gave his room a glance over before spotting something shining out the corner of his right eye. Looking fully, he spotted the Hitai-8 that belonged to Uchiha Sasuke. He could even remember when his clawed hand put the scratch across the surface, ironically marking Sasuke as a nuke nin. Watching as his bandaged arm grabbed the headband, Naruto was pulled from his thoughts by the door to his room opening. "Ah, you're awake." It was Shikamaru leaning against the doorframe with first a shocked expression, then a small smirk. "Yeah, I'm awake," Naruto replied after testing his voice a bit. "Think you could walk as well?" Shikamaru continued as he walked into the room and over to the bed as Naruto began shifting as if to get up. "With your help, I think I can manage." "Where are we going?" Naruto said as Shikamaru helped the blonde to his feet and they began to slowly walk out the room. "To sit with the others for a bit," Shikamaru replied as they shuffled off to where the rest of the squad was. After about 5 minutes of walking, Shikamaru opened the door to a large room with 4 beds, 2 of each which were against opposite walls. Currently 3 of the 4 beds held the rest of the retrieval squad. Choji was currently eating some food on the order to start regaining some of the protein and fat storage he lost from using the Sanshoku no Ginyaku. Hyuga Neji was currently resting against his propped-up pillows, as was Inuzuka Kiba, as they watched Choji eating at a shockingly slow pace. Akamaru laid in a small bed beside Kiba's, whimpering softly from the injuries he received during the mission as well. "Yo, look who I found," Shikamaru greeted as he guided Naruto into the room, which attracted the attention of the other room's occupants. "Hey man, good to see you made it. Did you complete the mission?" Kiba said weakly as his stomach injury was still very painful. "No, I didn't. He managed to overpower me and escape across the border," Naruto replied softly as he was helped into the last bed, as Choji, Neji, and Kiba grew solemn at this news. "Hey, come on guys, think positively. We did great for our first joint A-ranked mission. Sure, we didn't complete the objective, but we all managed to come out of it alive and a bit stronger mentally and emotionally, right?" Shikamaru said as he tried to steer the rest of his teammates away from thinking about the failure of the mission while grabbing one of the empty chairs in the room. "Shika's right, besides we just have to get stronger and try again, right?" Choji replied as his spirits returned as he sided with his best friend. "Definitely," Kiba said with a restrained laugh. "I suppose, someone has to watch your backs." Neji replied with a small smirk that was oddly enough become normal to the other 4 boys having spent close to 4 days out in the field with him. No. This came surprisingly from Naruto, who sat back on the bed he was in. No. Why not? You were the most vocal about retrieving Sasuke. Kiba asked, astonished at what he was hearing. That was before he tried to kill me. No, the way I see it, I'm not risking my life to haul back here. Naruto explained just as the sound of a gasp reached all their ears. Looking to where the sound originated, the 5 boys were looking at a shocked Sakura who looked absolutely devastated at what she just heard. Next to her stood Tsunade wearing her green jacket with the kanji for gamble sitting across the back, and Ino and Chusa, Choji's father. How can you say that when you promised that you would bring him back? Sakura asked after she regained her voice after realizing that Sasuke wasn't amongst their group, meaning the mission had ended in failure. 2 minutes prior, Sakura stood outside of Naruto's room as she steeled herself to see how the mission went. She was about to grasp the handle when a voice broke her thoughts in the silence. "Ah, here to visit your teammate?" Tsunade asked as she walked up the hall at a sedate pace. "Tsunade-sama, hi. What are you doing here?" Sakura replied with a catch in her voice at standing before her leader. "I was just making rounds and decided to check in Naruto since he got out of surgery an hour ago. I'll come in with you, he should be just waking up." Tsunade answered as she stopped at the door and pulled it open to reveal an empty room. "He's gone. Is this the right room?" Sakura asked as she stepped back out to confirm it was indeed the right room number. "It is, I'm the one who placed him here myself." Tsunade replied as she went to check the bathroom and came up empty. "Tsunade-sama. It's urgent, Choji's gone missing." Chusa proclaimed as his large stature filled the door to the room as he stopped to catch his breath as if he ran the entire way there with Ino hot on his heels as she stumbled into the room panting as well. "I think we should try to find them as quick as possible," Tsunade said as she brought her hands up into the hand sign Tatsuki Dragon and sent out a small pulse of chakra to find Naruto's chakra signature. She found his alongside Shikamaru's, Choji's, Neji's, and Kiba's, so they were all in the same room conversing. The thought of them growing closer after such a dangerous experience brought a smile to her face, even if the medic in her disapproved of freshly healed patients being moved from their rooms. "It's all right, I know where they are exactly. Follow me," Tsunade said as she dropped her hands and brushed by Chusa out the room with the other 3 following the busty fire shadow. After a leisure 5-minute walk they found themselves outside one of the large rooms used for multiple patients. Even with the door closed they could hear the sounds of talking coming from the room right before Tsunade opened the door and they caught the end of the conversation. "That was before he tried to kill me. No, the way I see it, I'm not risking my life to haul back here." This statement from her teammate caused Sakura to gasp in surprise. XXXXXXXX. In the room, presently. "How can you say that he's our teammate?" Sakura asked after she regained her voice after realizing that Sasuke wasn't amongst their group, meaning the mission had ended in failure. "Correction, was our teammate. He's already in Orochimaru's clutches, or could you not tell by the fact Sasuke isn't here with us?" Naruto replied as he looked up from his lap to stare at Sakura with his dull blue orbs. "But what about bringing Sasuke back to the village? You even swore on your Nindo, and you'd never go back on your word." Sakura tried again while everyone else in the room looked on silently. "And I don't dishonor my Nindo, but you can believe any hope of me bringing the Uchiha back to the village in a whole state died when he plunged 2 Chidori into my chest." Naruto snapped slightly after giving a hollow chuckle that was devoid of any real feeling. "Sasuke-kun wouldn't do that. You know the curse seal was influencing him." Sakura replied as she tried to defend her crush. "So I just did this to myself then." "Wake the hell up, Sakura, he left of his own free will. I tried talking to him and he didn't want to hear a damn thing I had to say. Instead he shoved 2 Chidoris into my chest without any hesitation and dropped me on my head in a piledriver move from off a cliff." Naruto snarled as he lifted his shirt and pulled back the bandages to show his still healing chest injuries. The sight of Naruto's 2 newly added fist-sized holes still healing on his chest brought looks of horror and anger to everyone's face bar Tsunade, who already seen the Uchiha's work firsthand. Sakura unconsciously took a step back from what she was seeing when Naruto got to unsteady feet, not wishing to be around the pinkett much longer. "Now if your precious Sasuke-kun was willing to do all that to me in order to reach Orochimaru, What do you think he would have done to you if he didn't have to worry about being caught by anyone the night he defected and you attempted to stop him? Naruto spat in a moment of mounting fury as Sakura looked ready to have a breakdown as he approached his remaining teammate. Naruto, that's enough. Tsunade snapped as she watched Naruto take uneasy steps past Sakura and stopped at the door. TCH, it just goes to show you the scene may be different but, the damned situation stays the same. I guess some things will never change for me. Naruto muttered as he shook his head before walking out the room. 1. For a while no one said anything as they looked at the doorway where Naruto disappeared from. Sakura couldn't even move as she was just looking straight ahead while Ino snapped from her bout of shock and went to try and console her friend rival. Hey, Sakura, you okay? Ino asked gently as she tapped Sakura lightly. It was all the girl needed before she just crumpled to the floor in a sea of tears. Look, Sakura, while what Naruto said was a bit out of line, it doesn't mean that he meant all of it. Tsunade said as she tested out the pink-haired girl's name. She didn't really have a chance to meet with anyone under Junin in terms of the active roster, so she just used the name as she heard from Ino's mouth. Actually, Hokage-sama Naruto has never said anything he didn't mean. Shikamaru said as he felt the blonde Senju needed to know. Explain this to me then, Shikamaru. Tsunade said as she grabbed a chair and got comfortable while Ino pulled Sakura from the floor to sit on the bed while Chusa moved to sit on the end of his son's bed. Well, I don't know if you knew, but back before we were genin, Naruto wasn't particularly liked during our days as academy students. It didn't help that Sasuke was in our graduating year and that every girl was taken for him. Shikamaru started before Tsunade became rigid at the last part and mumbled something to herself that sounded like fangirls, while glancing briefly in Sakura and Ino's direction before telling Shikamaru to continue. Well, it didn't matter what day it was, whenever Naruto opened his mouth anytime, whether it was to ask a question or to answer one, he was cut off and told he was a nuisance and disruptive. This even extended so far as that if anyone that wasn't Sasuke got told they weren't up to his cool level or whatever, but it was worse for Naruto, who was always told what was at Ino and Sakura. Oh yeah, stop trying to be as cool as Sasuke-kun, you're just a dobi and an orphan. Shikamaru said as he looked to the two genin kunoichi in the room for confirmation, only to watch them sort of shrink into themselves. Yeah, and it only got worse over time, especially after Squad 7 was created. Sakura would lash out at anything that seemed to put Sasuke in an unfavorable light. This included Naruto trying to do anything team-related. It was horrible to watch, especially in the Forest of Death during the Chunin exams. Choji said, adding his 2 cents, which seemed to make the two girls shrink in even further as their less than spectacular behavior was being aired to the Hokage, who was pinning them with an icy glare. So can you really blame Naruto for reacting the way he did? Being told off every time I tried to speak all the time would get me angry at people after a point, even someone who's supposed to be my teammate. Kiba asked as he too stuck up for his blonde comrade who always tried to stand by him when they were younger. I see. Well, I will look into all of that later and speak with Naruto. Right now I believe it best that you boys get some rest. No sense in having you all moved again, so I'll just tell the nurses that you've all swapped rooms. Tsunade said after she got up and held out a hand to stop any of the boys' protests. You four can stay for a little bit longer, but I will be sending a nurse in about 10 minutes to ensure you leave so these patients rest. Tsunade said as she turned on her heel and left the room, with voices of agreement following her out. Meanwhile in Ta no Kuni, in a hidden underground base, 3 people were traveling through a hallway that had nothing but prisoners in cells on either side. None of the 3 walking paid any attention to the cries of misery, pleading, and even death as they walked along. At the front was a man with gray-white hair and bandages covering all of his face except for one lone eye in the form of a snake's. This was one of the Sannin, the Hubby master and leader of Otogakure, Usano Orochimaru. 2. Next in the middle walked a young boy wearing a dark blue yukata. His onyx orbs were dark with thoughts of the training he would receive since he left his old village behind in the pursuit of power. His face was framed by 2 semi-long bangs that hung on either side of his face, while the rest of his hair resembled a duck's while hanging somewhat low without a hitai to hold it up. This was Uchiha Sasuke, fresh nuke nin of Konoha and newly appointed apprentice to Orochimaru. Pulling up the rear was a bespectacled young man, was wearing a purple tunic with matching pants and a white undershirt. He had silver white hair that hung in a loose ponytail that fell towards his back. This was Yakushi Kabuto, the right hand of his hubby Sanin master. You are my chosen one, Sasuke. Unfortunately, I apologize about meeting with you in such a state. Orochimaru hissed in a polite tone as they walked. I don't care about that, just give me power now. Sasuke said impatiently, only for Orochimaru to gaze at the Uchiha out the corner of his eye. You should watch yourself, Sasuke. It may not look like it, but that is indeed Orochimaru-sama. You will do well to remember to respect him at all times. Kabuto whispered as he leaned down to Sasuke's ear. Sasuke merely whipped his head to the side in order to glare heavily at Kabuto, who froze up in surprise and fright. Orochimaru meanwhile was onlooking with delight shining heavily in his eye. This boy will do fine as my future vessel, Orochimaru admitted to himself all the while walking. Back in Konoha, sunset had come while Naruto laid resting in his bed. He was contemplating on how he would go about getting stronger so he wouldn't have to rely on the Kyuubi's toxic chakra in the future. Moments later, a loud thud sounded just outside his window and by extension the hospital as well. Getting up, Naruto hobbled to the window and pulled back the curtains only to find a huge Gamma just sitting on the ground contently. The toad wore a blue jacket not unlike Gamabunta, however that wasn't what Naruto was focusing in, it was the rider atop the Gamma's head. The figure wore brown shinobi pants with a green net shirt covered by a red vest and wooden geta rather than sandals. His white hair is long, spiky and hung low against a large scroll strapped to his back. He had 2 vertical red stripes running down both his cheeks. The only thing missing was a large Hittite with small horns on the corners with a kanji in the middle that said Abura oil instead of the leaf insignia. The person Naruto knew very well, for it was the Densetsu Gamma Sennin no Okane Jiraiya, legendary toad sage Okane Jiraiya. 2. Eros Sennin, what are you doing here? Naruto asked calmly as he watched the Sannin leap from the toad to the windowsill after giving a greeting himself. I heard about what happened and came to check on you, Jiraiya explained as he got comfortable on the sill while watching as Naruto got back in bed. I'm not dead if that's what you're wondering, Naruto muttered as he sat up looking at the Gamma Sennin. Right, well, I've come to let you know that the Akatsuki has ceased their movements for the time being. You've got about 3 years before they come gunning for you. So with that in mind, I've decided to take you on as an apprentice, Jiraiya revealed as he looked over his shoulder at Naruto. Does this mean that you will actually train me? Or are you just going to show me a jutsu and leave me to figure it out while you go running around brothels? Naruto inquired as he regarded the Gamma Sennin with scrutinizing eyes. Jiraiya flinched ever so slightly at that remark. When he had heard about Naruto's condition due to the mission, he was truly worried. After all, the kid hardly knew any jutsu and it nearly cost him big time in the long run. Sure, Kakashi was supposed to teach the blonde as a true sensei would do, but all the Hitaki heir did was focus on the Uchiha, and look where it got Konoha. The kid defected to his ex-teammate all for the promise of power so he could kill his older brother. Well, after he started training Naruto for the Chunin exams, the responsibility of teaching fell to Jiraiya, but all he did was show Naruto the seals to use summoning and how to draw out the Kyuubi's chakra. Jiraiya could already see how Minato would be rolling in his grave at how his son turned out, not to mention the hurting that Kushina would put on him for neglecting her son. His mind made up, Jiraiya decided to do the right thing. Kid, when I get through with you, there won't be a shinobi out there that could compete with Super Soldier I'm going to turn you into, Jiraiya admitted as he gave Naruto a reassuring smile. Really? Then I'll hold you to that, Naruto replied while the room settled into a brief silence as Jiraiya looked to the rustic burning sky and Naruto laid back to stare at his ceiling. Kid, I know you want to save Sasuke, but forget about him. It will do nothing but drag you down if you focus on him. Not to mention I won't take you on as an apprentice, Jiraiya advised suddenly just in case he had to hammer the truth into Naruto's head. You won't hear any complaints from me. Personally, I'd like to remove the Uchiha from the face of existence, Naruto said rather darkly. Naruto as he sat up in bed. That's out of character for you. What brought on this line of thought? Jiraiya asked in shock that he hid well behind a simple mask of indifference. I'm pretty sure you'd change your outlook on life if you had an assassination jutsu shoved through your chest twice, Naruto replied as he looked at Jiraiya with a deadpan expression which caused the Gamma Nin to flinch once more. You are right. Listen, I've got some things to do, but I'll be back tomorrow to get you and we can set out. We'll be leaving around noon, so use the morning to get ready and say goodbye to whoever you need to, cause you won't be seeing them for the next 3 years. Jiraiya said as he stood up on the windowsill. Yeah, well, let me have some money to use for some new clothing, that orange eyesore won't cut it anymore. Naruto said as he got Jiraiya's attention before he could leave. Finally decided to wise up, huh? Well, I can definitely support that, here, get whatever you need. Jiraiya said as he tossed a bag of money on Naruto's bed before taking off on his Gamma summons. Once left alone, Naruto reached forward and grabbed the bag of money before putting it in his bedside drawer and laying down to rest. Say goodbye to people, huh? I know who to see before I go. Naruto thought before turning over and drifting off to sleep. Sometime later in the night, while Naruto slept soundly, Tsunade stood outside his door with a couple of scrolls and a note clutched to her chest. The busty blonde was silently questioning if she should leave him the scrolls, but then a moral voice spoke up saying that Naruto had a right to learn of his past like anyone else. Besides, he did make the requirement of Chunin in order to learn about it, so why the hell not? Opening the door to his room, Tsunade could see that he was getting a true good night's rest, if from what his medical file said about him having nightmares from when he was younger. Using her stealth as a shinobi, she moved to his bedside and left the 2 scrolls in the drawer next to the money pouch and the note on top. Then she crept back to the door, but not before ruffling Naruto's hair slightly. Good luck, Gaki, Tsunade projected mentally with a small smile as she closed the door and left Naruto in peace for the night. XXXXXXXXXX. The next day, Naruto awoke feeling like his old self as he stretched high and relaxed until the nurse came in and checked him out before declaring him fit to leave the hospital. After getting dressed, Naruto went to grab the money from his bedside drawer before noticing a note on top with the Hokage's personal seal on it. I wonder what this is about. Naruto thought as he picked up the note and broke the seal before opening it up and began reading it. Hey Gaki. I know you're going to be set to leave with Jiraiya today, and since I can't see you off, I felt I should give you something that you've rightly earned, the truth of who your parents were. Everything you'll need to know are inside 2 storage scrolls, one from each of them. You're probably wondering why you are just now getting something pertaining to your parents, but you've got to understand. It was kept from you for 3 reasons. The first is that because of who your parents were exactly, they had made a lot of enemies who would have loved to kill you as a form of vengeance against your parents. The second reason was because they request that if anything were to happen to them, you were to receive their scrolls when you've made Chunin or higher. And the last reason was that my sensei didn't want you to know so young an age, because you were most likely to go around shouting who your parents were to the world, which would have brought us back to reason number 1. Naruto stopped reading to blink owlishly at the fact that as a child, who wouldn't want people to know who their parents were? Naruto wasn't excluded from that harmless accusation. Getting back to the task at hand, he continued with the note. Anyway, the scrolls will answer most of your questions regarding your parents, but know this, even though they died the day of the Kyuubi attack, never doubt their love for you. It was that which allowed them to keep you safe that day. So that's it, I'll see you in 3 years, and don't let that old lech teammate of mine corrupt you with his perverted ways. Love. Senju Tsunade. P.S. Don't open the scrolls until you and Jiraiya are outside the village and by yourselves. Naruto folded up the paper and shoved it into his field pouch before opening the drawer to get his money, only to see that the 2 scrolls Tsunade spoke of were sitting there as well. Taking up everything and putting it into his field pouch, Naruto walked out the room and down the hall to where the rest of the retrieval team was still at after asking the nurse about them. Opening the door, Naruto could see that his friends were looking a bit better today. Choji was steadily gaining the fat and weight that he lost. Also, Neji and Kiba were actually able to eat a bit, even if it was only something as light as pudding. Shikamaru was there as well, which made it much easier instead of having to track the Nara down. Ahaya, guys. Naruto said as he walked in the room and closed the door. The other gave their greetings as he pulled up a chair and sat in it slowly. His body was still a bit tender from the mission. Hey man, you're looking better. Kiba said from his bed. Yeah, the nurse said she was kicking me out, something about me being blessed with a higher healing rate. Naruto replied. Man, you're lucky, the rest of us are stuck here for another 3 days at most. Kiba said with a small pout as he flopped back on his pillows. Naruto shrugged a bit before going completely quiet for a moment. Taking a deep breath, he launched into his tale about leaving the village for the next 3 years under Jiraiya's tutelage as his apprentice, during which Kiba groaned out that he was lucky once more. Kiba, would you quit being so troublesome? I think it's a good opportunity for you, Naruto. Shikamaru said with a smile as he looked upon his second blonde friend. Yeah, I guess he's going to need all the help he can get. When you get back Uzumaki, I want a rematch for that defeat in the Chunin exams. Kiba added as he too gave Naruto a smile. I too would like a rematch, Naruto-kun, when we are both stronger in 3 years. Neji said as he too agreed with the idea. You can count on me and Shika getting strong too, right Shikamaru? Choji said as he gave a warm smile while looking at his best friend and teammate. Troublesome, but yeah, while you get strong we'll all do the same. So get on out of here and get ready so you can leave. Shikamaru said as he too smiled. I will do that and I can't wait to see you guys again. Take care. Naruto replied as he gave a thumbs up, which all 4 of them returned before he got up and left the room. After taking the shinobi highway across the village to his apartment building, Naruto shuffled up to the 2nd floor and to his apartment door. Unlocking the door and stepping inside, Naruto was bathed in darkness. Slowly he moved about his apartment and began to clean the place up. No need to come back to a dirty apartment in 3 years. When he was done with that, he grabbed his travel bag and began to pack it with weapons, scrolls, and provisions. He then took out all of the orange tracksuits and began to stuff them into a bag to deposit in the trash. Once he was done and heading out the door with his trash load, Naruto stopped by his door and took one last look at his apartment when he noticed something. It was a framed photo of Squad 7. Walking over, Naruto picked up the picture and took a closer look at it. Kakashi stood in the background with a nervous look about him while he had a hand on the heads of Sasuke and Naruto, who were scowling at each other like it was going out of style. Lastly was Sakura in the middle with a naive yet happy smile, as she was the only one really focused on the camera. With a flicker of some unknown emotion dancing across his face, Naruto deposited the frame in the drawer and went back to the door and left without an over-the-shoulder glance as the apartment became still once more. Seeing that he still had about a good hour until Jiraiya came to collect him, Naruto decided to go and buy his new outfits before going to get a parting meal at Ichiraku's. So with that, Naruto took off in search of a decent clothing store. After about 5 minutes he landed outside of a store that looked new and held a lot of promise. It was called the Lone Claw. As he walked in, Naruto could see weapons piled high in barrels and stacked neatly on shelves lining the walls. Everything else like clothing, scrolls, ink and brushes, paper, pencils and pens, and just about anything a shinobi could need in the field was here. Clothing racks and shelves dotted the middle of the store filled with shirts, jackets, pants, shoes, and other accessories. Welcome to my shop, can I help you, young man? An elderly voice called out from the back, causing Naruto to look to that spot. A moment later an old man slowly walked out from the back. He looked to be well over 100 years old. The elder wore a simple gray gi that was held closed by a simple obi belt tied in the front. On his head rested a white bandana with large kanji written on them. Nothing of the man's eyes could be seen underneath his rather thick eyebrows. He had a well-kept goatee that was as white as his age showed. No, thank you, I can manage, Naruto said as he began walking around the clothing section and picked up some dark blue and black pants. He went on to get a couple pairs of shirts in gray, red, and black. As he neared the clerk, Naruto placed all his clothing on the counter while the old man seemed to view him interestingly. Something wrong? Naruto asked calmly but was prepared for anything. No, nothing at all, my boy, the old man said as he slowly began to ring up the clothing before bagging it and handing it back to Naruto. 1 second. Naruto stepped away to get some extra items he might have needed and coming back to the counter where the elder rang it up as well. That will be 150,000 ryu, the old man said as he tallied the total. Naruto reached into the money pouch and pulled out the required amount and handed it to the clerk, who took the money willingly. Please come again, the clerk said as he handed Naruto his recipe along with something else that was heavier in his palm as well. What is this? Naruto asked as he looked down at his hand to find an object sitting there. It was a small metal bird of prey with its talons extended while its wings beat against an imaginary air. A talisman, a falcon talisman to be precise. They say that the great lord of the skies protects those that carry that talisman. Think of it as a good luck charm, the old man replied with a warm chuckle. Thank you for this, Gomen, but I don't know your name, Naruto said as he looked up from the small pendant in gratitude for the small gesture. Oh, I'm called Muramasa and think nothing of it. Muramasa replied as he even gave Naruto a cord to hang the talisman from. Well, I'm Naruto by the way, and I can't at the moment, but I'd like to repay you for this kind gesture when I return. Naruto said as he very few things given to him out of kindness rather than obligation, the Ichirakus and the late Sandaime aside. As I said, think nothing of it, just remember to indulge an old man in some company over tea when you do return, and that will be enough. Muramasa replied as he watched Naruto slip the talisman around his neck. After sending Naruto out the store with a warm smile, Muramasa picked up a sword from below the counter along with some oil and a rag. As he began to clean the newly crafted katana, the old swordsmith couldn't keep the smile from spreading across his face. My, seems like only yesterday I watched Ryu ascend to the realm of great power with his skill. Time will tell if you will bring honor to your clan as well, little hatchling. Muramasa chuckled to himself as he continued to work in relaxing silence. XXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto was walking down the street with his new clothing sealed and stored away in his backpack for the trip. He was now heading to Ichiraku's for a parting bowl of ramen and to say goodbye to the two people that treated him like a normal person and family over the years. As he walked, Naruto heard his name being called softly and turned only catch the quick movement of a cream-tan jacket that he knew instantly belonged to Hyuga Hinata, first cousin to Neji and heiress to the prestigious Hyuga clan. Hello Hinata, what can I do for you? Naruto asked as he turned to where Hinata was trying to make herself smaller around the corner of a building she was standing next to. Thinking back, Naruto could see that she was naturally a shy person, but during the Chunin exams she really gave her all and showed everyone that she wasn't just a fragile icon for her clan. Hello Naruto-kun, I heard about the failed mission. Hinata said softly as she shuffled from her hiding space to face her secret crush fully while poking her fingers together. Pretend she's stuttering, I don't feel like actually typing it. Yeah, don't worry about it. Failed missions will happen throughout our careers, it's a part of the path we walk as shinobi, besides I'll just use this as a growing experience and move forward. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did for both me and Neji. Hinata started, but she was on the verge of passing out but struggled to remain strong and see this through. What, during the Chunin exams? Naruto asked and watched the young heiress nod her head. No problem, your cousin is actually an alright guy. Hinata, I have to go and do some things before I leave, but I want to tell you something. Naruto said as he walked close enough so he was standing right in front of her. What could he possibly have to say to me? Could it be that he finally professed his feelings to me? Hinata questioned as she began to mentally hyperventilate at scenarios that started flashing through her imagination. I know that ever since the Chunin exams, you've been trying to draw strength from my presence and way of thinking, but the truth is you shouldn't. Naruto replied and watched as Hinata hung her head in shame as if she had done something wrong. I'm not saying this as if you've done something bad, what I mean is that you should grow stronger for your own reasons and not anyone else. And one more thing, hold your head high. If you can't show that you're confident to others, how can you believe that you're confident in yourself? See you in a few years, Hinata-chan. Naruto continued as he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, which caused Hinata's head to snap up and look at him with wide eyes. The young heiress watched as the person she admired most after her mother turned on his heel and started down the street at a moderate pace. Hinata remained rooted on the spot as she replayed Naruto's words in her head. She couldn't even say anything as she watched Naruto vanish into the daily crowds moving through the streets. Turning around after realizing that she had practice, Hinata walked off with her head held higher than she ever did before. Arigato, Naruto-kun, Hinata thought as she glanced back before rushing off to make it to practice on time. 3. XXXXXXX. Naruto made it to the small ramen stand with time to spare. Pulling back the flap and sitting down, he came face to face with the waitress Ichiraku Ayame. She was the daughter of the stand's owner Ichiraku Tyuki. Ayame had a plain natural beauty about her with simple brown hair, matching eyes and fair skin. She wore a white robe with the sleeves folded, a dark blue apron with ribbon ties at the top and a bright white bandana. Hey Naruto-kun, what can I get you? Ayame asked as she took out a pad and pen. Let me get 3 tonkatsu, pork bone, ramen bowls and that will be it. Naruto replied, which caused Ayame to look at the young man she considered her adopted Ni-san with worry. Is everything all right, Naruto-kun? 3 bowls, that a lot less than what you would usually order. Ayame asked with a bit of shake in her voice. I'm perfectly fine, it's just that I'll be leaving the village soon enough and won't have a lot of time to gorge on ramen. Naruto replied calmly. Oh okay, so you wanted 3 tonkatsu ramen bowls, I'll get my father started on them. Ayame said with a warm smile after she settled down from the shock. As Ayame walked into the back to give her father the order, Naruto closed his eyes tiredly as he slumped forward on his arms for a bit to think. Naruto was so deep in thought that he didn't hear the soft chime from the flap signaling a customer, but he did sense when the person sat beside him. Thinking of backing out already, kid? Came Jiraiya's upbeat voice from left of Naruto, who opened his eyes halfway and looked to his newest sensei. No, I'm just still a bit tired. Besides that, all the running around I did this morning contributed as well. Naruto replied as he sat up a bit. Well, soon enough we'll be on the road and you'll have plenty of time to rest once we cover some ground. Jiraiya said just as Ayame returned from the back with all 3 bowls of ramen and sat them before Naruto. Okay Naruto-kun, here is your order. Oh Jiraiya-sama, what can I get you today? Ayame said as she gave a small gasp at seeing Jiraiya sitting next to Naruto. I'll have a simple miso ramen please. Jiraiya replied as he watched Ayame take down his order and pass it off to her father before coming back to the counter. So what brings you here Jiraiya-sama? Ayame asked as she began to wipe the countertop. Why, I came to collect Naruto-kun here, cause he's going to be leaving the village with me for the next 3 years for training. Jiraiya said as he looked at Ayame with a bright smile. Really, that's great Naruto-kun. Now you can get even stronger like you wanted. Ayame said with a bright smile of her own as she turned her gaze to Naruto, who began to dig into his meal. Yeah, but it won't be just a training trip but a learning one as well. Jiraiya said as Ayame went and quickly grabbed his order for him. After that, the ramen stand lapsed into a comfortable silence that had small chatter every now and again. Soon enough though, both Jiraiya and Naruto finished their meals and were each reaching for their wallets when Ayame spoke up. It's all right, that order was on the house. You take care of yourself out there Naruto-kun. Ayame said as she made her way around the counter to give Naruto a warm hug before he left. I will, and thank you Ayame-chan. Naruto said as he returned the hug before stepping away and grabbing his bag. Oi, Naruto, time we get going. Jiraiya pointed out as he hefted his own bag to his shoulders. I know. Naruto said as he gave Ayame a brief but warm smile before both shinobi walked out of the little stand and headed for the main gate. Naruto stood in front of the great gates with a bit of trepidation at the fact that he would be leaving Konoha for the next 3 years, however that trepidation was squashed by his desire to get stronger not only for himself but his friends that he made a promise to. Slowly the large doors groaned as they opened to the forest beyond the village walls. Ready for this Naruto, cause you won't be seeing these gates again for 3 years. Jiraiya said as he looked down at his new apprentice with a proud smile. As ready as I'll be sensei. Naruto replied as master and student began their journey out into the world beyond. Chapter 2, Training and Return. Somewhere in the forests of Hai no Kuni. It had been a week and a half since Jiraiya and Naruto left Konoha behind in pursuit of training. Right now we find them walking along the forest path at sunset in silence. Jiraiya had his nose glued in one of his Ika giggling the entire time. Naruto on the other hand was performing a chakra exercise that Jiraiya suggested while walking. He was to balance a leaf on top of his forehead with nothing but chakra while walking for as long as he could, and so far he was doing pretty well. How much further are we going to be traveling? I've been at this technique since we left that village we visited this morning. Naruto asked while he held the leaf with his chakra. I suppose we can find a place to set up camp for the night, but until then keep balancing that leaf, it's good for your chakra control. Jiraiya remarked as he looked over his shoulder at his apprentice. Hi sensei. Naruto replied as he doubled his efforts on keeping the leaf on his forehead while walking. The last mission really changed the kid, he never had this kind of focus and competency before it. I should talk to him when we've set up camp about it, just to make sure everything is fine with him psychologically. Jiraiya contemplated as he finished looking over his shoulder and focused on walking. Sometime later Jiraiya and Naruto walked off the frequently traveled path and moved into the cover of the forest before finding an adequate clearing for them to set up camp in. After ensuring that they wouldn't be discovered by anyone else and getting their camp set up, It was after sundown when Naruto and Jiraiya found themselves sitting in front of a moderate-sized fire while waiting on their water to finish boiling so they could eat some ramen for dinner. Hey Naruto, I couldn't help but notice you've been really quiet as of late ever since we left the village almost a full 2 weeks ago. Listen, if you want to talk about it, I'm all ears. Jiraiya said as he knew from experience from 2 wars what can lurk in the mind of a shinobi who bottled up all their problems. Naruto just looked up from the fire with a somewhat surprised expression before his features softened. Jiraiya sat patiently the entire time waiting for his apprentice to speak up. So you're wondering about the sudden change in my personality since my last mission, huh? Naruto asked softly while watching Jiraiya nod his head in confirmation. So Naruto began his tale of what happened from the point he caught up to his mission objective to when he woke up in the hospital. He even included the situation that he was in during a conversation with his tenant. By the end of the story, Jiraiya could honestly say he was certainly surprised by his student. Quote, So this loud personality you created, does that mean it's gone now? Jiraiya asked after finding the right way to pose his question. No, now gone per se. It's more like that personality is still a part of me. I'm still Uzumaki. Naruto just toned down from what everyone was used to always seeing since I created that mask all those years ago to protect myself from insanity. Naruto replied as they began pouring water into their ramen cups. The next few minutes were spent in silence as both master and apprentice ate their ramen cups in reflection. Soon Naruto finished and went over to his bags and began to dig around while Jiraiya finished off his cups and settled down for watching Naruto search for something. A moment later Naruto returned with 2 scrolls in his hands. What are those about? Jiraiya asked as he watched Naruto resume sitting in his spot. Tsunade gave these to me, they're supposed to hold the knowledge of who my parents were before their deaths. Naruto replied while still looking at the scrolls in his hands. Jiraiya flinched at this answer. It would come as no surprise to find out that he was named as Naruto's godfather by Kushina and Minato. He also couldn't rightly blame Naruto if he decided to want to blow up in anger at finding this out. Deciding to just meet this head-on, he waited for Naruto to break the seals on the scrolls. Quote, You know, for the longest time I've always wanted to know about my parents, now I'm not so sure I want to diminish the image that I had of them. Naruto muttered softly as he reached for the first seal after putting down the other scroll. Naruto, whatever you find out in those scrolls, know that your reaction will be completely justified. Jiraiya advised right before Naruto broke the seal and unraveled the scroll and began to read it. Hiya Naruto. Your mother told me we're making like a time capsule or something for you, so I put in my favorite jutsu so you can use them someday. A large scroll contains instructions for the Hiraishin and the Rasengan, 2 jutsu I'm very well known for. The Rasengan hasn't gotten completed yet, but I know you can finish it if I haven't. Inside the scroll are 3-pronged kunai which are used in conjunction with the Hiraishin, but not necessary. You can read more from the scroll. On to some serious business, son. You are most likely the vessel for the Kyuubi no Yoko if you're reading this letter. Please know that I had no other choice but to seal it within you, or we all wouldn't have survived that night. Also know that I didn't just leave you with no help where the Kyuubi was concerned. The night of the sealing I created a special key which will be used when you want to fully bring the Kyuubi's chakra under your control. The toads are the ones holding the key to your seal, so seek out Gamma Senin no Okane Jiraiya. He was my sensei and mentor when growing up. He will get you in contact with the toads to acquire the key. Also, Jiraiya was supposed to be your godfather in case something happened to us. I hope you two get along well like I did with him. One more thing Naruto, take care of your mother in my absence and know that I didn't stop loving you for 1 second. Okay kiddo, that should be it. Remember to do your best and good luck son. Love. Minato Namikaze, your father, Yondaime Hokage. By the end of the letter Naruto tears in the corners of his eyes even as he had a small scowl on his face. Taking a deep breath in preparation of an explosion of anger, Jiraiya got up and sat next to his godson. You going to be alright, Naruto? Jiraiya asked tentatively while Naruto just rolled up the scroll and sat it next to him. Yeah, I knew deep down that I wanted to be like the Yondaime when I was younger, but to find out that my idol was father is a surprising experience. Naruto admitted as his shoulders slumped a bit. I see, and how do you feel about finding out that I was named your godfather? Jiraiya asked as he braced himself for the outburst. I doubt it will really change anything now, but answer me one thing. If you knew I was your godson the entire time, how come you didn't come and check on me when I was younger? Naruto inquired as he turned his dark blue eyes on his godfather. To be honest, I tried to see you as much as I was able to, but I had a vast spy network to run. Not to mention I was tracking and being tracked by Orochimaru, so I couldn't always just head for Konoha any time I wanted. Even thought I should have checked on you more. I know it isn't a consolation for me not being there, but I was the one who gave you Gama-chan wallet for your 6th birthday. Jiraiya explained as he decided to just come clean with his godson. I know I should have done better for you when I first met you at the hot springs, but I didn't, and were it not for the Kyuubi you might not have come out of that retrieval mission alive. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make up for that long-time mistake if you'll let me. Jiraiya continued as he looked at his godson, who just took in all that was said while closing his eyes in thought. Quote, Crying about it or getting angry at you won't really change anything or help my situation any, but if you're truly willing to be there for me from now on, I can accept your indirect apology and question of forgiveness. Naruto stated after a full minute of silence as he turned to look at Jiraiya. What about Minato? You're not angry with your father for sealing the Kyuubi in you? Jiraiya soldiered on, wanting to know Naruto's thoughts further on the matter. While I don't hate him, I can't forgive him just yet for putting such blind faith in a whole village of people, from what I was told by Sarutobi Gigi. Maybe sometime down the road, but not right now. That's all we could ask for, I guess. So you going to open the scroll from your mother? Jiraiya replied as he pointed to the unopened scroll in Naruto's lap. With the same motions as before, Naruto broke the blood wax seal and unraveled the scroll and began to read it. Naruto, if you are reading this letter, then I and your father are dead. We asked the Sandaime Hokage if he would watch over you in case we were never able to. It seems that it has come to that. You may not have had the chance to know me, but I am your Ka-san, Kushina Uzumaki. My baby boy, I want you to know that you are a hero, Naruto. No matter what anyone tells you, it is because of you that Konoha still stands today. I'm quite sure that in our last moments your father and I have done what I really did not wish to do. You see, Naruto, you hold the Kyuubi Kitsune no Yoko inside of you. I'm sure if you're old enough that you know this by now, so I won't say too much on that. Just know that I probably disagreed with your father's option of sealing the Kyuubi inside of you, but I'm sure in the end, it was too late for any other choice. I would have probably also disagreed with Sarutobi-sama when and if he said that you should never be told of the Kyuubi. I'm sure he didn't tell you for a long time, but I'm sure you know by now. I love you, Naruto, and so does your father. We know that you are not the demon and that you never will be. You're our greatest treasure and accomplishment in life, never doubt or forget that. Now on to serious business, Naruto. Our clan had a strong and rich history that stretched back beyond the era of the elemental countries. Before we were the Uzumaki clan, we were known as a powerful shinobi clan by the name of Hayabusa, and before that we were known as the ancient dragon clans. The main story that was passed down through history is of our clan's origin was that our clan were powerful fighters that worshipped and revered a deity known as the Ryujin, dragon god. It was he who blessed our clan with our abilities and something that would come to be known as the dragon lineage. The dragon lineage allowed us higher levels of endurance, skill, speed, and strength than regular shinobi. It was because of this, coupled with our training, that we were revered and hated as the best by both ally and enemy alike. Only truly dedicated clansmen could awaken the true potential of the Hayabusa clan, and even rarer could an heir to the clan be allowed to carry and wield the Rukan dragon sword in battle. It is a sword unlike any other, with the hidden power of 12 guardian dragons flowing through it. And when combined with the Ryu no Magatama, the blade becomes the Shinryuken, true dragon sword. In this awakened state, the sword has immense and unparalleled power that can only be harnessed properly by a master dragon shinobi. Unfortunately, I tried and could not use the true dragon sword, but where I failed you must succeed, my Sochi. I fear you will need to do so in order to prepare yourself for the future, as the dragon sword may be needed once again to repel the encroaching darkness. Along with our clan's history and the dragon sword, I have included the techniques that our clan created and perfected throughout our history that you will need to master in order to be successful. I believe in you and know that you will become great, just like your ancestor Hayabusa Ryu, who was known as the singular super ninja during his time. Naruto, I'm going to finish this letter now. I hope you read all of it. I had to write fast. The doctors tell me it won't be long now until you're born, but I had to finish this one last message to you. No matter what happens Naruto, I know that you will make me and our ancient clan proud, whether it's in Konoha or elsewhere. Also we left everything of ours to you, so even if you decide to quit being a shinobi there is enough money to ensure you can take care of yourself for the rest of your days. Good luck Naruto-kun, I know that you will become the greatest shinobi of your time, and maybe Hokage if the village is as Minato has always said even though I know that's not the case. Love. Kushina Uzumaki, your loving Ka-san. P.S. Watch out for that perverted godfather of yours Jiraiya and make sure he doesn't corrupt you into his image. By the time Naruto was through with his Ka-san's letter to him he had tears flowing down his face in both sorrow and happiness. Sure he didn't have his mother with him but now he knew that she loved him unconditionally and that his clan had such a long and powerful history to draw from. With tears still fresh on his cheeks, Naruto got up and placed the two scrolls lovingly inside of his bag at the bottom so he wouldn't lose them. Jiraiya watched his godson in silence as the blonde sat back in front of the fire lost in thought, deciding to turn in for now and try to get some rest. Nay, Jiraiya-sensei. Naruto called out softly over the crackle of the wood chips exploding in the fire pit. What is it? Jiraiya asked mid-stride towards his sleeping bag. Let's make this training trip really worth it. Naruto said as he looked up from the fire with a burning determination that wouldn't be dimmed by anything. Sure, just remember to completely douse the fire and get as much sleep as you can. We're going start first thing in the morning and we're not going to stop until 3 years are up. Jiraiya replied with a smile that held pride in his godson taking his training seriously. XXXXXXXXXX. 6 months later, near Cha no Kuni. Naruto stood on a lake with a blindfold over his eyes as he did push-ups while concentrating on keeping a leaf on his forehead with nothing but chakra, all this while he waited for an attack from Jiraiya to disrupt his flow. The blonde shinobi didn't have long to wait as he could feel the shift in the rhythm of the water as Jiraiya attacked. The Gamma Sennin threw a fast punch followed by a short axe and finished up with a driving knee. Naruto flipped up from his exercise and dodged the punch in the same moment, then he jumped away from the axe kick only to quickly block the knee with his hands before flipping over his sensei and spinning around in the air and whipping out a kick at Jiraiya's head which he caught effortlessly before tossing his godson away. Spinning around easily on the water, Jiraiya kicked off quickly and closed the gap with his student who mimicked him as they broke into an all-out taijutsu exchange. Kicks were swung, punches and elbows were blocked and parried with efficiency. Naruto found himself on the defensive heavily as it took all he had to properly stay just out of reach from Jiraiya's hits. He felt an opening and went for it as he parried a heavy palm strike and hit his godfather with a sickening uppercut only to jump with his opponent and continue hitting the Gamma Sennin until he quickly created a cage bunshin and they both wrapped their arms around Jiraiya as the flipped upside down and began spinning at high speeds into the water below. A huge crash of water split the air as Naruto landed kneeling on the water while attempting to catch his breath. Sensing movement behind him Naruto whipped around to face it only to end up bent over Jiraiya's knee and then tossed all the way to shore with one good toss from the Gamma Sennin. Sitting up slowly Naruto winced in pain as he removed the blindfold as he shook his head to clear the ringing out. That was a very good taijutsu match, although you need to work on your speed more. In the time it took you to get my upside down, if I was an enemy I would have escaped before killing you with my next move. Still it was good, Jiraiya said as he walked over and handed his godson a clean towel to dry off with. Thanks sensei, so what's next? Naruto replied as he slowly got to his feet. Well you know the first of your clan's ninpo that you've been practicing. Jiraiya inquired as he and Naruto walked back to where they left their stuff on the shoreline. Hi. Naruto replied as he got to his bag and began to dress in a gray shirt and dark blue training pants. Well when you get dressed we're going to bring your hand seal speed up with a little proper motivation. Jiraiya replied as he grinned sadistically. Why do I get the feeling I'm not going to like his idea? Naruto thought as he unconsciously shivered at the feeling he got from Jiraiya. Some time later we find Jiraiya and Naruto standing at the base of large oak tree that was standing tall and proud in the afternoon light. Your task Naruto is to climb this tree using the Kinobori no Waza, art of tree climbing, while going through the seals for your ninpo up to 100 times. I will be down here tossing these kunai with low-powered explosive tags wrapped around them. If you get blown off the tree by one of the you have to start all over from one until you reach the goal. Jiraiya explained as he held up some of the kunai he would be using. Hi sensei, any time limit on when I'm to finish this exercise? Naruto asked as he stepped up to the trunk of the tree. As a matter of fact, yes. You have until sunset to complete this, otherwise I will double the amount you have to dodge with double the explosive power next time. Jiraiya replied as he signaled his godson to begin climbing. Naruto took off and started up the tree while weaving his arms through the 3-hand seals for the ninpo. He was 1/3 of the way up and through his first 7 reps when a kunai lodged itself in front of him and threw his off into the ground below. Flipping until he righted himself in the air, Naruto landed with a soft thud on the ground. You fell off, start over. Jiraiya replied as he watched his godson dash up the tree again, only for him to toss 3 kunai this time. Naruto and Jiraiya keep up the training for the remainder of the afternoon, even thought Naruto was slowly gaining ground with it. In Konoha, medical training facility. Sakura and Ino were both standing over their fish in a very shallow container of water. They were attempting to stabilize the slowly dying fish, but so far neither of them were successful. Tsunade stood over top of them watching with a critical eye as they worked with the Shozen Jutsu mystical palm technique in order to accomplish this. Both of you are pushing chakra into the fish at too fast of a pace, slow it down or you'll kill your patient. Tsunade said out of the blue as she monitored their control. Hi, Shisho. Both girls said as they adjusted their control. It had been a month since both girls came to the Senju princess asking for training from the woman. At first Tsunade told them off because she didn't want to deal with fangirls. However, Ino and Sakura were persistent in becoming her apprentices, so in the end she allowed them to begin learning under her provided they adhered to every order and lesson no matter what and without questions asked. They're both coming along nicely, however they take too long to respond to a problem. They'll learn yet or quit before long. Tsunade thought as she stepped forward and with a finger on each of the girl's fishes, she induced a pocket clot which was very dangerous to leave untreated in a patient. Both of you need to act quickly and neutralize those clots, otherwise your patient will die from lack of blood to the brain. Tsunade warned as she watched both kunoichi scramble to keep their fish alive. For the next 5 minutes, Sakura and Ino stretched themselves to their limit in order to keep their fish alive. They tried everything they could and managed to each figure out a different solution that not only destroyed the clot but allowed them to pull their patient into the stable safe zone. Congratulations are in order for the moment, girls. You managed to not lose your first patient even though it was a fish. That will be all the training for today. However, first thing tomorrow I want a full-page report on what procedure you used to save your fish and would it work to save a human patient as well. Tsunade said as she promptly dismissed the exhausted girls and watched them both stumble from the room with looks of pride on their faces. Cute, you girls can have your moment today, cause tomorrow I'm just going to kick it right back out of you before shoving in everything medical that I'm willing to teach to you both. Tsunade thought with a sadistic grin as she cleaned up and grabbed her green jacket. Another part of Konoha, the Inuzuka compound. Gatsuga. A large whirling drill slammed into a training dummy with devastating force which reduced it and a small area around it to rubble. Kiba stopped his rotation before jumping back away from the dummy and landed near Akamaru, who still couldn't train right away but was there to support his partner nonetheless. That was good, Kiba, you've gotten a bit better but it's not good enough. You're still relying on the fact that your opponent will be distracted by your support attack while you wind up your body for the Gatsuga. Not to mention you're twisting your body too far for the amount of torque needed for the jutsu anyway. Try again. Sume barked gruffly as she pointed to another dummy. Hi, Ka-san. Gatsuga. Kiba huffed out before he launched himself at the next training dummy. Keep working at it, Kiba, and in no time will you be stronger for all the hard work you're putting in. Sume thought with pride before she barked out for Kiba to do the jutsu once more. Hyuga compound. After having that small conversation with Naruto, Hinata returned home and with a vigor that neither she nor the rest of her family, especially her father, knew she possessed, she jumped into her daily Juken training and started to excel by leaps and bounds. Now she was able to properly perform a kaiden to about 20 feet around her. Also, when she sparred with Neji or her younger sister Hanabi, she fought with a ferocity that surprised even them as she begun to win a large number of their matches. Right now Hinata was out in the main training courtyard by herself as she attacked a training dummy with Juken strikes. What was interesting though was her hands were completely covered in visible chakra as she lashed out with each strike. I will get stronger. Hinata thought as she slammed both her palms into the dummy, leaving very deep chakra burns as her rhythm picked up speed with each passing second. Naruto-kun was right, I need to have more confidence in myself. Even when I'm ready to quit. Hinata continued as she started adding flips and twists into her moves to attack from even greater angles. I will change my clan into something brighter because that is my dream. Hinata thought with all the strength she had as she slammed both her palms into the dummy full force and backed off, only for the wooden dummy to explode into piece from the delayed reaction. I'm close, but it's not enough, I'm going to keep training until I drop. Hinata thought as she looked down at her slightly burned hands before walking over to another dummy and began her workout on it. Unbeknownst to the young heiress, she was being quietly watched by her father, who was sitting on a bench nearby while enjoying the day. And even though he didn't show it, Hiyashi was smiling on the inside at the way Hinata was changing into a strong woman more and more each day. No doubt I have more to thank you for, Uzumaki Naruto. Hiyashi thought as he continued to sip his tea in relaxing bliss. Konoha, Training Ground 13. Guy watched with pride on his face as his team continued their practice well into the afternoon. Neji and Lee were locked in a fast-paced spar while standing in front of different angled bullseyes as Tenten improved her accuracy by trying to hit the targets while avoiding her teammates. Neji swatted away a brutal right hook from Lee before throwing two quick palm strikes followed by a side kick to create some space for himself. Lee dodged the two palm strikes before matching Neji's kick with one of his own. The team's Hyuga member jumped back and assessed his options while rubbing his leg to get some feeling back in it. Lee took advantage of that moment of opportunity and rushed Neji with a flurry of punches and kicks he was hard-pressed to evade or block. Neji redirected one of Lee's punches before stepping inside the taijutsu adept's guard and hit him with a shoulder slam and then a palm strike to the stomach. Right as he was going to finish the spar, a couple of kunai came whizzing by his line of sight, causing the branch member to backflip to avoid unnecessary damage. Oh, Gomen Neji-kun. Tenten gasped before shouting out as she realized how close she came to hurting her teammate. Yosh, that's enough training for today, you can all go on home, but remember to be up bright and early so that we may continue with this light training. Guy called out with a smile as Neji and Tenten undid the weights they were wearing on their arms and legs. Only he would call this light training. Neji and Tenten thought dismally as they looked at their 50-pound leg weights before dropping the training aids and making a beeline away from the training field and the sunset genjutsu of doom that Guy and Lee always seemed to create when they got fired up about over-the-top training. XXXXXXXXXX. 1 year later, Shikamaru leaned against a railing with a lazy posture as he watched his two teammates along with squads 8 and 9 being promoted to Chunin rank by their Hokage as she handed each of them their Chunin flak jackets with a proud smile on her face. After that, a huge party got underway at the Inoshika-cho picnic grounds as the rookie 10 for the time being were settling into a full-blown party in honor of them each reaching a milestone in their careers. Kiba, Lee and Choji were having a competition to see who could stuff themselves full off of some food. The young kunoichi of the rookie teams along with Tenten from Team Guy and Temari of Suna, who was visiting for the exams, talked amongst themselves. Neji and Shino rested quietly underneath a large shady tree, both were relaxing in their own ways. All the Junin senseis along with Tsunade and Shizune and the parents of the newly made Chunins were all sitting around swapping old stories of their exploits, while Shikamaru was off to the side laying in the grass watching the clouds go by with quiet interest. Soon a shadow fell over the young Nara heir and he looked to see who it was. Naturally, Choji had won the eating contest and decided to check on his longtime best friend. "Oi, Shika, you all right?" Choji asked in real worry for his friend. "Huh, oh, yeah, I was just thinking, Naruto should be here with us right now enjoying this party too. It doesn't feel the same without him around." Shikamaru replied with a well-timed sigh while Choji took up space next to him. "I know what you mean, but remember, he left the village to become stronger. Besides, look at it like this, you can give him a party when he returns to the village in another year and a half." Choji pointed out as he nudged Shikamaru. Ever since Naruto told the four of them about his training trip, they kept the real reason to themselves, not even telling their senseis or families about it. "Yeah, I guess you're right, thanks Choji." Shikamaru chuckled a bit as Choji got up and made his way back over to the food table to eat more. As troublesome as he is sometimes, Choji really knows just what to say to cheer a person up. I hope you're doing well, Naruto, and I can't wait to see how much stronger you've gotten. Everyone else here has gotten strong as well. Shikamaru reflected with a small smile as a gentle breeze moved through the village as he resumed his hobby of cloud watching. Somewhere in Tasuki no Kuni, Moon Country, Naruto was completely still as he watched from the branch he was crouching on. Below him sat his objective in the small. An A-ranked nuke nin from Kurigor by the name of Shizo, who was an arrogant shinobi and felt that it was his divine right to just abuse an innocent, hard-working village for his own personal gain. It didn't help any that whatever aid that the daimyo of Tasuki no Kuni sent was completely destroyed by his water jutsu. So there Naruto was sitting in a hidden position as he watched Shizo along with his small bandit group going to collect their monthly payment from the villagers in return for allowing them to see next month. It came as no surprise to the blonde shinobi when the villagers who had enough of living in fear decided to stand up to Shizo and his bandits even though it could have cost them in the end. Watching as one of the bandits kicked a small boy in the stomach when he called out that he wasn't afraid of Shizo's group, Naruto had enough and decided to put an end to Shizo. So taking out some kunai and with a well-placed aim, Naruto threw the small knives with incredible strength and accuracy. The kunai whistled slightly through the air as they embedded themselves in each of the bandits' skulls. Shizo however turned around and knocked away the two aimed for him and looked for his attacker. Naruto didn't disappoint as he jumped into view wearing a deep purple gi that covered his features from head to toe leaving his eyes exposed, and right now they were two frozen orbs of predatory power as he sized up Shizo. So who do we have here? A gaki in purple clothing wanting to fight me Alright, I've got some time to kill, let's get to it, kid. Shizo chuckled just as he rushed forward with a punch ready. Naruto easily caught the fist and ducked underneath the follow-up kunai slash before shoulder tossing Shizo away from the village and mixing in a chakra-enhanced kick to push the nuke nin further away from the village. Shizo couldn't believe what just happened. Some brat came out of nowhere and just tossed him away like he was nothing. He wouldn't accept such an outcome. He'd first kill the kid and then work those villagers over even harder for all they were worth before killing each and every one of them off. Those thoughts were put on hold as Shizo righted himself in the air only to perform kawarimi a moment later in order to avoid a large group of kunai and shuriken which turned the log into a pile of brush. Landing in a clearing in the middle of the forest, Shizo looked around while his senses flared in an effort to get a beat on his opponent. Hearing movement in the brush behind him had the Kiri nin spinning around while tossing a kunai only to hit air as the knife was lost in the surrounding area. Keep cool, Shizo, that gaki is around here somewhere. Shizo thought just as a soft thump caught his ear. Looking down, Shizo saw 3 kunai embedded in the dirt in front of him. Not even a second later the hiss of an exploding tag reached his ears. Shizo managed to avoid the explosion by jumping to the right only for another 3 exploding kunai to land in the spot he was moving to. Using his reflexes and agility, Shizo began a series of backflips away from the second explosion only to look up in shock during mid-flip as a kunai flew right next his body in slow motion. Time slowed down to a crawl as the explosion unraveled in a white-hot flash of fire and shrapnel as the kunai was also blown to bits and flew in all directions. Shizo could only feel extreme pain as the explosion rocketed him through the air and into a tree as blood ran free from his wounds caused by the broken kunai. He landed in a heap after slamming into the trunk of a tree and going right through it. The second tree stopped his momentum as he fell to the forest floor in a heap. Stumbling to his feet while using the tree he was leaning against, Shizo looked to where the purple-wearing Naruto landed on a nearby branch in a crouch. If you think you're so strong, then face me head-on if you dare. Shizo shouted due to a combination of blood loss and a severely deflated and crushed ego. Naruto just tilted his head to the side ever so slightly like a bird of prey would when looking at a potential meal. Tepidama! Shizo screamed as he flew through hand seals and filled his chest with chakra and water before spitting out 5 dense water bullets that flew at Naruto's position. Naruto for the most part just used his own agility in that branch to weave around 4 of the water bullets before jumping straight into the air and over to another branch as the last bullet slammed into his previous spot. Shizo, who by this time lost himself to his own hysteria due to blood lost, took off in a dead run in no particular direction. Naruto watched all this before silently giving chase through the treetops as Shizo scrambled to get away while screaming the entire way. Soon both shinobi came to a medium-sized stream that ran through the part of Tasuki no Kuni they were in. Shizo immediately turned on his heel and looked to the tree line only to find Naruto waiting with those cold and empty eyes that seemed to be haunting the nuke nin. "I'll fix you good, you freak. Just try and stop this if you can. Ha 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 ha." Shizo cackled with an insane fever in his eyes as he began to gather chakra for his jutsu. Naruto just watched from his perch as Shizo's speed doubled, even as his seals became sloppy with each passing second. In the stream behind him, Shizo was mixing his chakra with the water to call forth his just you. Soon a large dragon made of water rose into existence with its chilling golden eyes. "Here it is, Kuzo. Suiten, Suiryuden." Shizo laughed as the dragon launched itself across the clearing at Naruto's posture. Water exploded everywhere as the water dragon destroyed the branch and everything behind it for about 3 trees as the water began to wash over the landscape. Shizo began to laugh uncontrollably as he sank to his knees in relief at finishing off his opponent. The Kiri-nin's celebration didn't last long as a whirring sound filled the air. Looking up, Shizo could only watch in a fever-induced shock as Naruto plowed right into him with a ball of chakra clutched in his outstretched hand. Naruto watched with indifference as Shizo's chest cavity was ground into nothing by his Rasengan, while being blown back across the stream by the jutsu. Naruto stood upright and slowly made his way over to his fallen target. Once he was standing over Shizo's body, he watched as the light left the Kiri trader's eyes for good before pulling the sword on his back free and lopping off the head and burning the body with a Kaden jutsu. After depositing the head in a scroll for storage after inspection, Naruto vanished in a blur of movement. First he stopped off to assure the villagers that Shizo was in fact dead and even disposed of the bandit bodies before moving on. He traveled quickly over to Tsuki no Kuni's terrain until he reached the major village where he was to meet up with his sensei. Tsunagaku. Gaara silently sat down in the seat that symbolized the trust and love his village had in him to lead them as their kage. "That's right, I'm the god, I'm Kage now," Gaara thought to himself with a bit of shock at it all. After the Suna-Oto invasion of Konoha almost 2 years ago and his crushing defeat at the hands of Naruto, Gaara returned to his home village as a slowly changing person. No longer did the feeling of death and bloodlust cling to him like a second skin. Nor were his eyes filled with such an indifference to taking a human life, and it was all thanks to his first real friend Uzumaki Naruto. He realized the same pain and loneliness that was hidden inside Gaara and show him that it was okay to trust those that truly cared for you. This revelation brought hope to Gaara's bleak world and allowed him to begin patching things with his older siblings as they left the invasion behind. It was also because of that battle that the villagers of Suna began to see him in a new light as their protector and now leader. "In time I will be able to truly thank you for this, Naruto," Gaara thought as he just sat behind his desk ready to really lead his people. XXXXXXXXXX. A year and a half later, in Otogakur, Sasuke stared impassively at the large group of slaves carrying real weapons and improvised ones as they ran at him full tilt, intent on carrying out their end of the deal set up with a mysterious guy wrapped in bandages. They were promised freedom if they could land a solid blow against one person and draw blood. So there they were, charging down the last of the Uchiha who just activated his Sharingan while gripping his newly acquired Chikudo by the hilt. The group surrounded him and struck with their weapons. A second later a chirping sound filled the air as the ones that had attacked were blown back into the rest, revealing a completely unharmed Sasuke standing there with his hand wrapped around his fully unsheathed blade. Those that didn't attack first were a bit hesitant until they realized that if they couldn't complete this task they would never escape this personal hell they were trapped in, so they renewed their efforts to attack Sasuke, who just began to channel lightning chakra through his sword. Chidori Nagashi. Sasuke decided to not waste any more time and took one step before disappearing from view. All the attacking slaves knew was that their target had vanished, and they soon found themselves in immense pain as they began to drop to the floor in agony. Sasuke appeared at the other end of the group with his Chikudo hanging at his side, still emitting small arcs of lighting every now and again. A clapping seemed to rise above the groans of pain from the still very much alive group of slaves. Looking for the source of the noise, Sasuke glanced up at Orochimaru and Kabuto, who were watching the proceedings. Orochimaru had long since returned to his original form along with that sadistic smirk of satisfaction he often wore. Kabuto looked pretty much the same as before. "Splendid, Sasuke, your training is progressing quite nicely, but tell me, how is it you left your opponents alive?" Orochimaru inquired with a polite tone. "It would be a waste of my chakra and time to do such a thing." Sasuke scoffed as he sheathed his Chikudo and walked off, leaving the battlefield behind for some rest. In Konoha, Hyuga compound, Neji blocked another Juken strike from Hinata, before twisting to deliver on of his own, which she dodged easily as they continued with their fast-paced sparring match. In the next few days he was going to take his Junin certification trial and was aiming to pass it fully. That's why Neji was in the training courtyard having an intense sparring match with Hinata to keep his skills sharp. The test would be even more rigorous than the Chunin exams ever were, and Neji was aiming to be as physically ready as he could with intense training with both Hinata and his teammates every day since the moment he was nominated to take the trial by Guy. Neji grunted in pain as Hinata managed to close a good number of his tenketsu before he got out of harm's way. He sidestepped a wicked-looking palm strike to the chest and went to give one of his own, but Hinata proved her natural flexibility by weaving around the attack and continuing with rapid strikes that Neji was actually pushed to keep from hitting him. Pulling out a couple of kunai, Neji jumped away from Hinata while letting the weapons free. The young heiress began to spin rapidly as she used a kaiden to deflect the shuriken. As her rotation slowed down, Hinata pulled a kunai free and flung at the airborne Neji, who could do nothing but use his own kaiden to deflect the flying knife. Just as he landed on the ground, Neji engaged Hinata in another taijutsu exchange that filled the air with whip crack sounds and a high volume of dust. Suddenly the bell for a timer went off, alerting the two combatants the spar was at an end. Neji had a strike aimed for Hinata's forehead while the young heiress had her hand a mere 2 centimeters from his heart. "You've gotten much better, Hinata-sama. That was a very rigorous battle you just fought," Neji said as he let up to catch his breath. "Thank you, Neji-ni-san, but I've still got a ways to go on improving my skill," Hinata replied as she walked over and picked up her towel to wipe the sweat from her neck and face. After Naruto left, she worked on speaking with stuttering throughout a conversation. Now she only stuttered when she was extremely frustrated or embarrassed. "Well, I appreciate all the help you've been giving to help me get ready for my Junin trail," Neji replied as he too grabbed his towel. "You will do just fine as you did during the Chunin exams," Hinata encouraged as she gave Neji a warm smile. "I will need to be more than just fine for this trial, but the encouragement is nice to hear," Neji replied as he returned her smile with a small one of his own before walking off to get some rest and a bath to soothe his muscles. Konoha, Training Ground 3. Choji zipped from one end of the training ground to the other as he was attempting different ways to increase the damage output of his Nikuden Sensha human bullet tank. It was his 15th attempt so far and he used the last of his chakra to make the attic before he fell out on the grass, breathing heavily. "That was good, Choji. Take a rest and let your reserves refill," Asuma called out between the cigarette in his lips. Shikamaru spared a glance at his recovering teammate before focusing on what he was doing. He was practicing on of his clan's more advanced jutsu, the Kage Nui no Jutsu, shadow sewing technique. By allowing his shadow to take on the appearance of actual shadow needles, Shikamaru was using his will to make the shadows interact with objects of different weights at different speeds for varying lengths of time. Right then he was using his jutsu to play a match of shogi with Asuma. This was to increase his overall skill with the Kage Nui as well as helping improving his multitasking abilities as well. "Well, Choji seems to be coming along nicely," Asuma said as he made his move and blew out a cloud of smoke into the air. "Yeah, we actually worked out a way for him to accurately attack the enemy," Shikamaru replied while moving one of his pieces with a shadow tendril. "Really? He'll have to show me once he's rested up," Asuma said as he frowned in concentration before making a move against Shikamaru. The males of Squad 10 continued to practice well into the afternoon, while Ino was off continuing her own training, which now included learning the skills behind interrogation from her father, Anko, and Ibiki. Forests surrounding Konoha. Kiba and Shino were standing back to back on a branch as they were trying to pinpoint their opponents who were somewhere in the trees. Their respective parents Sume and Aburame Shibi decided to up their children's tracking skills with an intense game of shinobi capture the flag using specialized flags while playing. Right now they were having a rough time of it, just as they spotted one of their parents Sume or Shibi would spring a trap in order to evade capture. So Kiba and Shino were each using their own method of tracking their parents. "Do you smell either of them, Shino?" Kiba growled softly in frustration as his eyes scanned the dark of the tree canopy. "No, my Kikaichu cannot accurately find our objectives," Shino replied in a rare instance of conversation. Suddenly Kiba swung around at smelling the scent of his mother's flag and ran at the source. Out of the darkness a pellet shattered on the wide branch in front of him and released a foul odor that had the young Inuzuka air cursing at his luck. Sume exploded from the branch above Kiba with a feral grin at getting the drop on her son, or she would be if Shino didn't send a wave of his Kikaichu at the female clan head. Sume twisted her body in the air as she landed on the branch and ran at Shino and the downed Kiba. As she got closer she threw a smoke pellet to cover what she was going to do just as the two boys each tossed a kunai into the smoke cloud. There was no sound indicating that the two kunai hit home. This instantly put the two heirs on defense just before the kunai they threw came sailing out of the smoke. Shino and Kiba managed to jump and get airborne only to realize their mistake a split second too late as Sume and Shibi exploded out of the smoke at them. In a switching pattern the two clan heads leapt at the other's child. Kiba was swarmed by a wall of Kikaichu from Shibi, while Shino found himself on the receiving end of a Suga passing Fang courtesy of Sume. Both Kiba and Shino couldn't do anything but plummet to the ground below as the attacks did a large amount of damage to them. About 5 minutes later both boys were resting under one of the trees while their parents went over the mock exercise with them. Okay, you both did very well up until the end. Pup, you're gonna have to learn to plow on through smells that would otherwise leave your nose paralyzed. Letting something like that affect you during battle is a surefire way to get killed. Sume lectured with her arms crossed as she looked at Kiba who lowered his head in disappointment with himself. Shino, you mustn't always wait until your opponent has made a move in order to devise a strategy. Even with your Kikaichu to support you, you could leave yourself open to an overwhelming attack when doing so. Shibi added calmly to his own son who just nodded in understanding. Another thing for the both of you, next time don't be so quick to react by jumping into the air. As you both experienced without a maneuver to evade with, you're a sitting duck to enemy retaliation. However other than those things you both did well with tracking us up till the end. Sume replied with a teeth-filled smile. Kiba and Shino just rested up as much as they could before their parents wanted to run the game once more. 2 years and 4 months later, just within the border of Hai no Kuni. Jiraiya and a cloaked Naruto had stopped in a good-sized village for the day, and were standing outside of a bar and grill the golden lot in the rain. They were getting something to eat and Jiraiya was also going to introduce Naruto to another contact within Jiraiya's vast spy network. For the last few months that's really all they were doing aside from training was taking Naruto around the elemental countries getting him familiar with the network especially if he was going to take over after Jiraiya. Remember it will pretty much be like the last few times. Jiraiya said as he looked at his cloaked godson who looked back. You mean when you got shit-faced drunk and then expected me to cart you back to the hotel? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow underneath his hood. Of course not. Look, just keep quiet and let me do all the talking. Jiraiya replied with a bit for indignation in his tone at his godson's audacity. All right sensei, if you say so. Naruto replied with a soft sigh as he followed Jiraiya into the building. As they walked in the atmosphere of the building was warm with excitement as people chattered in large groups while enjoying drinks or chattered softly while eating a meal. Jiraiya and Naruto walked over to the bar portion and sat down at the counter on the far end. Quietly they watched people getting served and whatnot by the bartenders while generally living life. Soon a bartender came walking over and Naruto was observing them. She was a woman in her mid-30s with shoulder-length dark brown hair done up in a simple half-bun that left some of her hair free to frame her face. He could see that she had a very earthy beauty around her that belied the air of danger lurking just underneath. All in all this was a woman not to be trifled with easily. Jiraiya-kun, what brings you to my part of the world today? The woman chuckled as she began wiping down the counter nearby and working her way over. Hey, Aiko. Just passing through for a drink on my way back to Konoha is all. Jiraiya replied while giving a warm grin. Why didn't you say so? You haven't been peeping on women for the sake of research again, right? Aiko laughed with a disarming smile while her tone and eyes told of a promise of pain at the wrong answer. No, of course not. In fact I've been rather busy, training matter of fact. Jiraiya replied with an uneasy smile while leaning back as Naruto looked on quietly in interest at another woman aside from Tsunade that could make Jiraiya cower like that. Good, because if I found out otherwise, I'd have to smash your goods with a piece of bamboo again. Aiko said sweetly as she stood upright as Jiraiya whimpered and cupped himself in ghost pain. So is this him Jiraiya-kun? Aiko asked as she finally set eyes on Naruto, who was sitting comfortably in the darkness. Like a real shinobi should. She thought with a small smile. Yeah, this is my apprentice Uzumaki Naruto. Jiraiya stated with pride evident in his voice as he put a gentle hand on Naruto's shoulder. Out of nowhere a bottle made its way onto the counter in front of Aiko alongside 3 saucers. After popping the top and pouring enough in all 3 saucers, Aiko looked directly at Naruto while holding up hers. Quote. You drink? Not particularly, but when I do it's with the best of them. Naruto replied as he took up the saucer and downed a large gulp of the alcohol in one go. That's what I like to hear, a person after my own heart who know when and how to consume alcohol. Not like that binge-drinking teammate of yours Jiraiya. Aiko replied with a smile at Naruto before frowning in thought of Tsunade. It wasn't that Aiko disliked Tsunade as a person or a shinobi, no, Aiko disliked the Namakuji Hime, slug princess, as a drinker. Alcohol was to be tasted, savored and enjoyed with each swallow, any connoisseur of the stuff knew. Then there were the people like Tsunade who just downed the stuff like it was water going out of style. They didn't appreciate their drink in the slightest. After that the conversation turned general with laughter as actual drinks and some light food was ordered and Naruto spoke some but kept quiet most of the time as he was just observing the bar and what he could see from where he was sitting. Soon enough Jiraiya went to pay for their orders and Naruto watched as he passed a small note along with the money. Aiko gave Jiraiya his change with another note passed between their hands. Naruto could see that this was one of the more low-key information exchanges that required careful timing and execution to be a success. See ya, Aiko, and thanks for the food and drinks. Jiraiya replied, getting to his feet along with Naruto. Don't be strangers you two, and bring some good sake next time. Aiko laughed as she waved them off and the 2 shinobi left the building and started on their way again. 2 years and 5 months later, Konohagakure. Tsunade sat behind her desk with a happy smile on her face and her feet kicked up on her desk. There were no missions for today, the council wasn't bugging her, and to top it all of her paperwork for once was completed ahead of schedule. She still couldn't place a feeling she was getting but shook it off in favor of having some quality time to herself. Ah, sensei, you had an excellent taste in sake and now I get to taste. Tsunade sighed in bliss as she brought her saucer to her lips just as the sounds of footsteps outside her office. Tsun-sama. Shizune called out as she opened the door to the office carrying Taunton and something else in her hands with their liaison from Suna. Sabaku no Temari and Sakura, who happened to be on the way to Tsunade's office in tow. Sigh, what is it, Shizune? Tsunade sighed as her chibi self mentally threw a tantrum at not getting any alone time. It's from the Cage and the Suna Council. Shizune replied as she threw a letter and scroll on her mentor's desk which Tsunade grabbed up. What did they want? Tsunade asked with growing seriousness as she sat up straighter. Opening the letter from Suna, Tsunade read about how Suna wanted to further cement their alliance between the villages. Whatever it being offered was no doubt going to increase Tsunade's paperwork for the next few months. What does the letter say, Shisho? Sakura asked, having forgotten for the moment why she came to her teacher's office in favor of learning about what was going on. I'm about to find out. Tsunade answered as she broke the seal on the scroll and began to read its contents. As she read the scroll, Tsunade's audience watched as her eyes grew wider with each sentence until her eyeballs looked ready to pop out from her skull. Once she was done, Tsunade threw the scroll down and grabbed the forgotten sake bottle and began to chug the alcohol down as if to wash her mind on what she just read away. Tsunade-sama, what does the scroll say? Shizune asked with worry before Tsunade just gestured to the scroll and continued to drink from the bottle while sending Temari sidelong glances. Shizune put down Taunton and picked up the scroll to read. She took in the official date of the scroll as being at least 2 years old before reading further. Apparently Suna was proposing a political marriage between their strongest kunoichi and the one who defeated their strongest shinobi in battle, which happened to be the current Cage Sabaku no Gara. Reading closer, Shizune saw that the selected kunoichi was none other than Temari, who was standing in the room, and the selected groom was none other than one Uzumaki Naruto. Shizune just rolled up the scroll before taking the bottle of sake from her mentor and taking a huge drink of what was left inside. Sakura, out for now. Whatever you need can wait for the time being. You take a seat, Temari. Tsunade ordered as she pointed her second apprentice to the door and pointed Temari into a seat. Sakura obeyed but silently fumed while doing so. After ensuring that Sakura's chakra signature was nowhere nearby, Tsunade activated the security seals to the office to ensure their privacy. They didn't have to worry about the Anbu in the room because they were swore to secrecy on pain of death if Tsunade suspected they would talk, so they were safe. What did my brother and the council offer? Temari inquired hesitantly as she got the feeling that whatever it was involved her somehow. This was drawn up 2 years ago, sometime after the failed invasion, as a way to make amends for siding with Orochimaru. It's a marriage proposal between Suna's strongest kunoichi, you, and the one who managed to best Gaara, their strongest shinobi, in battle. Tsunade said as she got right to it and explained what the scroll contained to her fellow blonde. Temari let her memory jump back 2 years ago to the invasion, and instantly she got the image of an orange-wearing Naruto as he battled her youngest brother in a battle that still gave her nightmares sometime at night. You mean I'm being offered to marry Uzumaki Naruto? Temari all but shouted to the heavens with wide eyes as the Anbu within the room also joined her in their eyes bugging out. Quote. Yes, that's what the scroll is proposing, unless you have an objection to it. If so, I can working something out with your home village. Tsunade offered as she regained her composure and laced her fingers together while looking over them. At that, Temari hung her head so they couldn't see her face as she mumbled out a response. At Shizune and Tsunade's coaxing, Temari raised her head enough they could see a light blush on her cheeks. This stunned the two older kunoichi slightly, as they had a good deal of respect for the younger Junin for her skill as a trained shinobi. What was it you said? Tsunade repeated as they awaited Temari's response. I said you don't have to do that. I want to go through with it. Temari said as she said the last part softly before dropping her head again. At this, Tsunade got a sly smirk on her face as she leaned closer to the desk. So you got the hots for Naruto Tsunade chuckled, which caused Shizune to admonish her and for Temari's blush to deepen by a degree. It's not like that, I actually find him to be a good person and somewhat of a mystery. That and I never got the chance to thank for helping Gaara. Temari replied in a flustered tone that had her angry and yet excited at possibly getting to know Naruto on a more personal level. Hero worship, even better. Tsunade laughed while Temari was feeling her face become even hotter. Shizune, who was getting tired of her mentor torturing poor Temari, decided to help the young Suna kunoichi. You know, Tsunade-sama, if Naruto does accept the proposal when he returns, that means you will be responsible for filling out the paperwork to make it binding. Shizune stated with a sense of satisfaction as she watched her mentor pale at the possibility of more paperwork. Ah, damn it. Even when that Gaki isn't here, he's still giving me a major headache. Tsunade cursed as she began ranting about the increase in paperwork while Shizune put a supportive hand on Temari's shoulder and winked at her when the kunoichi looked up. 3 years later, just outside Konohagakure. So how's it feel to be home after so long? Jiraiya asked as he looked at his godson and successor out the corner of his eye as they jumped through the trees. Honestly, it's comforting, and yet things will be different from 3 years ago. Naruto pointed out as he looked back at his godfather and sensei. Jiraiya couldn't help but smile at Naruto as they continued moving closer to Konoha. It had been 3 years since he witnessed Naruto's growth as a childlike chunin into a truly strong man that stood next to him today. Pride threatened to explode in his chest as he looked at his third apprentice that has grown very well, and honestly Jiraiya couldn't be any happier with his accomplishment as a sensei. What he found funny was that all 3 of his apprentices had a drive to improve themselves no matter the cost, and that gave Jiraiya joy like no other. Soon they were outside the huge gates that closed off the village to the outside world. So Jiraiya and Naruto jumped down onto the road and walked up to the guard station where 2 chunins, Katetsu and Azuma, were sitting while talking with a group of travelers. Jiraiya and Naruto walked over just as the travelers were being led inside. Name and papers please, Azuma said with practiced ease as he looked at the clipboard in front of him. I'm shocked that neither of you two would recognize such an important and great person such as I. Nevertheless, I shall introduce myself. I'm known by all as the Gama Sennin no Mount Myoboku, Toad Sage of Mount Myoboku, and Sato no Kyoki, the village's madness. I'm the legendary gallant Okane Jiraiya. Jiraiya claimed loudly as he summoned a Gama and stood on top of it in a dramatic pose. Naruto just watched from nearby as once again, Jiraiya made a fool of himself for attention. Well, Konoha, I'm home at last, Naruto thought as he looked past the gate and into the village where he grew up. One mission. One marriage. A new legend begins. If you enjoyed it, like, share, and subscribe to Fox Fan Fiction. Comment below, was this marriage fate or strategy?